1960s, there was something special in the air. It was an era of incurable optimism. We were going to the moon. We had the Jetsons on TV. It seemed like science and technology were just about to solve all our problems. Why stand in traffic by a bridge when you could just drive off the road and cross the river? It was in this atmosphere, where no idea seemed too crazy, that this object was born. If you lived in the 1960s and wanted to cross a body of water, you had two options. Find a bridge, like a normal, grounded person. Or, you could buy an Amphicar Model 770. Let's be perfectly honest from the start. This is not just a car. And, God forbid, it's not just a boat. It's a compromise. And, like any big compromise, like, say, a spork, it's equally bad at both jobs. It stabs food awkwardly and scoops soup terribly. The Amphicar is the spork of the automotive world. So today, we're not going to waste time asking, was it a good car? Spoiler, no. It was a terrible car. Slow, clumsy, with awful handling. We're also not going to ask, was it a good boat? Spoiler, God, no. It was a barely competent, floating object that was actively trying to rust from the inside out. No. Today we're going to talk about why. Why, despite all this, it was one of the weirdest, most bizarre, and, in its own way, most charming failures in all of automotive history. Let's start where we should. With the name. Model 770. Sounds cool, right? Sounds technical. Like a Boeing 707 inches or a Magnum 357. It's something powerful. Maybe it's the engine displacement? 7.7 liters? Oh, no. No, no, no. Okay, maybe it's horsepower? 770 horses? This car barely had 43 horsepower. We'll get to that. No. The name, 770, isn't a technical specification. It's, literally, an owner's manual. It's the speed limit, built right into the badge. 770. 7 meant 7 knots. That was its stated top speed on the water. For those of us who aren't salty sea dogs, 7 knots is about 8 miles per hour. Or 13 kilometers per hour. Let me give you some context. A professional Olympic swimmer can develop a speed of 8 to 9 kilometers per hour. Meaning, this car boat was barely outrunning a very fast human. You weren't racing across the lake. You were drifting with intent. Any flock of ducks probably looked at you with disdain as they passed you. This wasn't boating, it was a controlled flood. That was the 7. So what about the 70? 70 meant 70 miles per hour. That's 112 kilometers per hour. Its stated top speed, on land. And here we need to talk about the word, stated. To get this steel bathtub on wheels. Which, by the way, had the aerodynamics of a medium-sized refrigerator. Up to 70 miles per hour. You needed a very strong tailwind. You needed a very long, very straight stretch of road, preferably downhill. And yes, you probably needed a prayer. Most owners said a realistic, comfortable cruising speed was closer to 60 to 65 miles per hour. And even then, the thing handled. Well, like a boat. On the road. It was wallowy and vague. Reaching 70 miles per hour wasn't so much an engineering achievement as it was an act of pure bravery. So, right from the start, from the name itself, the manufacturer was essentially looking you in the eye and saying, look, this is all we've got. 7 knots and 70 miles. That's our limit. Please, don't complain. But who on earth is attracted to such a crazy promise? Eccentric millionaires? Yes. Showmen? Absolutely. How about the 36th President of the United States? Yes. Probably the most famous, and certainly the most powerful, owner of an Amphicar was none other than Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ. He had a huge ranch in Texas, and the Pedernales River ran through it. And LBJ was a notorious prankster. He loved playing jokes on people. And his Amphicar was his favorite tool for it. Picture the scene. You're a high-level guest. Maybe a cabinet member, like Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Maybe a foreign diplomat. You've come to the ranch to discuss serious business. The Cold War, the budget, whatever. LBJ says, "Come on, let me show you the ranch." You get into this weird little blue convertible. The president himself is driving. You're driving down a dusty Texas road, talking, and suddenly you notice you're going fast. Very fast. And you're heading straight for a very steep slope, which leads right into the river. You start to cough nervously. Mr. President, the river? But LBJ doesn't seem to be braking. In fact, he seems to be accelerating. And right then, just at the moment you're sure it's over, the president starts to scream frantically. He's pounding the dashboard. He's pumping the brake pedal. And he's yelling at the top of his lungs. The brakes are out. The brakes have failed. We're gonna crash. We're going into the water. Imagine the horror. You're not just going to crash. You are about to witness and participate in the death of the President of the United States. Your life flashes before your eyes. Passengers screamed. They grabbed onto whatever they could. And at the last possible second, the car would fly into the water and just calmly start floating. And there you sit, your heart hammering in your throat, trying to catch your breath, while Lyndon B. Johnson, laughing his head off, calmly putters down the river as if it's the most normal thing in the world. That joke tells you everything you need to know about both LBJ and the Amphicar. It was a car that looked like it was about to sink, but somehow, it didn't. Okay, pranks aside, but how did this brick actually float? How did it work? Did it have two engines? One for the road, one for the water? Oh, no. That would be too complicated, too expensive, and too smart. No, the heart, if you can call it that, of the Amphicar was a single, solitary engine. And it was, as we mentioned, the wimpy four-cylinder from a Triumph Herald. A small, British, budget car. This engine produced a whopping 43 horsepower. 43. Let me stress that again. A modern high-end riding lawnmower can have 25 to 30 horsepower. This engine had to push over a ton of German steel down the highway, and then push that same ton of steel against a current. The engineers looked at this and said, yeah, that's probably fine. But here's the engineering magic. Or possibly, dark magic. There was one engine, but two drive systems. When you were driving on the road, everything was standard. 4-speed manual transmission. Rear-wheel drive. Normal, boring. But when you wanted to become captain driver, you'd roll into the water, put the gearbox in neutral, and pull a second, separate lever. This lever engaged what's called a power takeoff, PTO. It essentially disconnected power from the wheels and, through a separate gearbox, sent it to the back. To two nylon propellers. Not metal. Nylon. Probably to save weight and so they wouldn't rust off in 5 minutes. And off you'd go. Putting along. Powered by 43 horsepower. And now you understand why the speed was only 7 knots. The engine just didn't have any more to give. But, here's the real trick. The coolest part. What if you need to drive out of the water? Onto a slippery boat ramp? Or a muddy bank? The wheels will just spin in the water. And the props will just push the car's nose into the mud. The Amphicar engineers thought of that. The design allowed you to do the unthinkable. You could engage both the wheels and the propellers at the same time. It was a sort of aqua-terrestrial all-wheel drive. You'd put it in first gear, to spin the wheels, and engage the prop lever. The propellers would push the car forward, shoving it against the bank, while the wheels desperately tried to get a grip on the ground. It probably sounded like the end of the world. Grinding, roaring, splashing. But this weird creature, like a seal, would haul itself out onto dry land. It was ingenious. And terrifying. All at once. Okay. We're floating. We have 43 horsepower. It's spinning 2 props. We're moving, barely. Now, how do we turn? Well, on any normal boat. On any boat. You have a wheel, a helm, that's connected to a rudder. A vertical fin at the back that directs the flow of water. It's, basic hydrodynamics. The Amphicar engineers looked at this idea. Then they looked at the steering wheel that was already in the car. And they seemed to have collectively shrugged and said, hey, it'll be fine. In the Amphicar, there is no rudder. None. At all. 0. So how the hell did it steer? You just turned the steering wheel. the regular car steering wheel. And it, just like on the road, turned your front wheels. Let me explain why this is as absurd an idea as is physically possible. Wheels are designed to roll. They are round, thin, and have minimal resistance. Rudders are designed to create resistance and direct flow. They are wide and flat. Using your front wheels as rudders is it's like trying to paddle a canoe with 2 soup spoons. No, it's like trying to steer a canoe by just sticking 2 soup spoons in the water on either side. Yes, technically, they create some drag. If you crank the wheel all the way to the left, the wheels under the water will create a tiny bit more drag. And this entire ton of steel, very slowly, will begin to turn. Owners said the turning radius was, let's just say, vast. You didn't just turn. You had to plan a maneuver in advance. By several minutes. Any crosswind? Forget it. You're just blown off course. Trying to dock next to a pier? Oh, good luck. It was impossible. You were better off just flooring it towards the shore, driving out like a car, and parking. This wasn't just poor handling. This was, as it was nicknamed, drunken duck handling. It just sort of wandered in the general direction you pointed it. Despite all this criticism, despite the slow speed, the terrible steering, and the fact that it was, essentially, a bathtub with an engine, the Amphicar had something to prove. It had to prove it wasn't just a rich guy's pool toy. And so, in 1965, 2 captains, or drivers, 2 madmen, decided to do the unthinkable. They took 2 Amphicars and successfully crossed the English Channel. Think about that. Not a lake. Not a river. The English Channel. One of the busiest, most dangerous, choppiest waterways on the planet. A place known as a graveyard of ships. And they did it, according to some reports, in 20-foot, 6-meter waves. 20 feet. That's the height of a 2-story building. Imagine being in a convertible, driving up a 2-story wall of water, and then sliding down the other side. In a car that barely floats in a calm lake and steers with its front wheels. It was an absolutely, clinically insane publicity stunt. But they did it. It proved the Amphicar could float. It didn't mean it should. But it could. But you probably still have one major question, don't you? How? How did it not sink? It's a convertible. It has no roof. And it has doors. Boats don't have doors below the waterline. That's rule number 1 of boat building, don't put holes where the water is. So how did they solve this? Well, first, the body was essentially a steel tub. Everything was welded watertight. But the doors had special double rubber seals. But even that wasn't enough. So, before you entered the water, you had a ritual. You'd close the door, like normal, click. And then, you had to pull another, separate handle inside the door. This handle engaged a mechanism that physically sucked the door into the frame, compressing those rubber seals with immense force. It was a marine-grade seal. And if you forgot, if you just drove into the lake, having forgotten to pull that second handle, you were going to have a very bad day. But even with this, the biggest problem, the thing that killed these cars, wasn't that they sank. It was that they leaked. And this brings us to maintenance. The car required grease. Lots of grease. Tons of it. The Amphicar had 13 grease points, nipples. 13. For comparison, your modern car has 0. And here's what the manual said. You had to grease these points after every single time you came out of the water. Imagine that. You've had a lovely day at the lake. You're tired. The kids are hungry. You get home. And you can't just park the car in the garage. No. You have to crawl under a wet, muddy car with a grease gun and pump grease into 13 different spots. Even worse. A few of those points. The manual required you to grease them every 2 hours while in the water. Meaning you had to pull over to the shore, get out, and start greasing. If you missed just one spot, if you forgot, sea or lake, water would get into the bearings, into the transmission, into everything. And congratulations. You didn't just miss a lube job. You just bought yourself a rolling aquarium. This brings me to my favorite part. The standard equipment. What do you expect as standard equipment in a 60s car? A spare tire? Yes. A radio? Maybe, as an option. The Amphicar came from the factory, standard, with a bilge pump. Think about that. A bilge pump is a pump you use to pump out the water that has already gotten inside your boat. The manufacturer was so unconvinced of their own car's watertightness that they just installed a pump from the factory, assuming you were guaranteed to leak. That's like selling a toaster that comes bundled with a small fire extinguisher. It does not inspire confidence. And one more thing. Since it was, legally, both a car and a boat, it had to follow two sets of rules. So, it had normal headlights, brake lights, and turn signals. But it also came with proper marine navigation lights, a red one on the port, left, side, and a green one on the starboard, right, side. Imagine driving down the highway at night with these weird red and green lights glowing. The police must have had a field day. So, why aren't we all driving amphibious cars today? Why didn't this brilliant or insane idea take over the world? The Amphicar flopped hard. From 1961 to 1968, only 3,878 were ever made. And there were a few reasons. First, price. This thing was expensive. It cost as much as a nice Jaguar E-Type or a Chevrolet Corvette. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a buyer. You could have one of the most beautiful, fastest sports cars in history. Or you could have this. A toy that drives badly and boats badly. It was a very expensive novelty. Second, performance. As we've established, it was a terrible car, slow, clumsy, and a terrible boat, also slow, steers like a log. It was a jack of all trades and a master of absolutely none. But the final nail in the coffin, the thing that truly killed the company, was bureaucracy. In 1968, new, strict U.S. federal safety and emission standards, the EPA, came into effect. And that little, weak Triumph Herald engine from the 1950s, it was already struggling. There was no way it could pass the new emissions tests. And re-engineering the entire vehicle, the entire sealed hull, the entire drivetrain to fit a new, modern, cleaner engine, it would have been impossibly expensive. The company, which was already barely keeping its head above water, pun intended, simply couldn't afford it. And production stopped. The Amphicar 770 is a monument to a dream. A 1960s dream where nothing was impossible. It wasn't a good car, and it wasn't a good boat. But damn it, it was both. And for that audacity alone, it's impossible not to love it.